Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is Mr. Potiker here with a screencast-o-matic presentation on why socialization matters. This is just an audiovisual recording of the reading that coincides with the key concept questions for part 2. So please just go ahead and do the best that you can to answer these questions fully with detail. And remember, you can replay any part of this presentation for later. At the very end, there's a final question that actually pertains to me and other adopted children in analyzing nature versus nurture. So please make sure that if you have any questions about that question, you can, of course, feel free to reach out to me if you need. I believe Mr. Paulus is going to be reading this particular reading passage to you in class in sociology if you are hybrid in the latter part of the alphabet. So let's go ahead and get started. Why socialization matters. Socialization is critical to both individuals and to societies in which they live. It illustrates how completely intertwined human beings and their social worlds are. First, it is through teaching culture to new members that a society perpetuates itself, and if a new generation of society don't learn its way of life, it ceases to exist. Whatever is distinctive about a culture must be transmitted to those who join in it, or, of course, order for society to survive. For U.S. culture to continue in this way, for example, children in the United States must learn about cultural values related to democracy. If they have to learn about norms of voting, as well as how to use material objects such as voting machines, of course, some would argue that it's just as important in the U.S. culture for the younger generation to learn the etiquette of eating in a restaurant or the rituals of tailgate parties at football games. In fact, there are many ideas and objects that people in the United States teach children about in the hopes of keeping the society's way of life going through another generation. So, socialization is just as essential to us as individuals. Social interaction provides the means via which we gradually become able to see ourselves through the eyes of others, and how we learn who we are and how we fit into the world around us. In addition to function successfully in society, we have to learn the basics of both material and non-material culture. Everything from how to dress ourselves to what's suitable attire for a specific occasion, from when we sleep to what we sleep on, and from what's considered appropriate to eat for dinner to how we use a stove to prepare it. Most importantly, we have to learn language, whether it's the dominant language or one common in a subculture, whether it's verbal or through signs, in order to communicate and to think. As we see with Danielle, without socialization, we literally have no self. Nature versus nurture. Some experts assert that who we are is a result of nurture, the relationships and caring that surround us. Others argue, however, that we are based entirely in genetics. According to this belief, our temperaments, interests, and talents are set before birth. From this perspective, then, who we are depends on nature. One way researchers attempt to measure the impact of nature is by studying twins. Some studies have followed identical twins who were raised separately. The pairs shared the same genetics, but in some cases were socialized in different ways. Instances of this type of the situation are rare, but studying the degree to which identical twins raised apart are the same and different can give researchers insight to the way our temperaments, preferences, and abilities are shaped by our genetic makeup versus our social environment. For example, in 1968, twin girls born to a mentally ill mother were put up for adoption, separated from each other and raised in different households. The adoptive parents, and certainly the babies, did not realize the girls were one of the 5 pairs of twins who were made subjects of a scientific study. In 2003, the 2 women, then aged 35, were reunited. Elise Shine and Paula Bernstein sat together in awe, feeling like they were looking into a mirror. Not only did they look alike, but they also behaved alike, using the same hand gestures and facial expressions. Studies like these point to the genetic roots of our temperament and behavior. Though genetics and hormones play an important role in human behavior, sociology's larger concern is the effect as on human behavior, the nurture side of the nature versus nurture debate. What race were the twins? From the social class were the parents? What about gender? Religion. All these factors affected the lives of the twins as much as their genetic makeup and are critical to consider as we look at life through the sociological lens. The life of Chris Langan, the smartest man you'd never heard of. Bouncer, firefighter, factory worker, cowboy, Chris Langan spent the majority of his adult life just getting by with jobs like these. He had no college degree, few resources, and a past filled with much disappointment. Chris Langan also had an IQ of over 195, nearly 100 points higher than the average person. So why didn't Chris become a neurosurgeon, professor, or aeronautical engineer? According to Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, The Story of Success, Chris didn't possess the set of social skills necessary to succeed on such a high level, skills that aren't innate but learned. Gladwell looked to a recent study conducted by sociologist Annette Laurel, in which she closely shadowed 12 families from various economic backgrounds and examined their parenting techniques. Parents from lower-income families followed the strategy of accomplishment of natural growth, which is to say that they let their children develop on their own for a large amount of independence, and parents from higher-income families, however, actively foster and assess the child's talents, opinions, and skills. These parents were more likely to engage in analytical conversation, encourage active questioning of the establishment, and foster development of negotiation skills. But the parents were also able to introduce their children to a wide range of activities, from sports to music to accelerated academic programs. When one middle class child was denied entry to a gifted and talented program, the mother petitioned the school and arranged additional testing until her daughter was admitted. Lower income parents, however, were more likely to unquestionably obey authorities such as school boards. Their children were not being socialized to comfortably confront the system and speak up. What does this have to do with Chris Langdon, deemed by some as the smartest man in the world? Well, you see, Chris was born in severe poverty, moving across the country with an abusive and alcoholic stepfather. His genius went largely unnoticed, but after accepting a full scholarship to Reed College, he lost his funding after his mother failed to fill out necessary paperwork. Unable to successfully make his case to the administration, Chris, who had received straight A's at the previous semester, was given F's on his transcript and forced to drop out. After he enrolled in Montana State and administrators refused to rearrange his class schedule, left him unable to find the means necessary to travel the 16 miles to attend classes. What Chris had in brilliance, he lacked in practical intelligence, or what the psychologist Robert Sternberg defines as knowing what to say to whom, knowing when to say it, and knowing how to say it for maximum effect. Such knowledge was never part of this socialization. Chris gave up on school and began working on an array of blue-collar jobs, pursuing his intellectual interests on the side. Though he's recently garnered attention for his cognitive theoretic model of the universe, he remains weary of and reticent to the educational system. As Gladwell concluded, he'd had to make his way alone, and no one, not rock stars, not professional athletes, not software billionaires, not even geniuses, ever makes it alone. Sociologists all recognize the importance of socialization for healthy individual and societal development. But how do scholars working in the three major theoretical paradigms approach this topic? Structural functionalists would say that socialization is essential to society, both because it trains members to operate successfully within it and because it perpetuates culture by transmitting it to new generations. Without socialization, a society's culture would perish as members died off. But a conflict theorist might argue that socialization reproduces inequality from generation to generation by conveying different expectations and norms to those with different social characteristics. For example, individuals are socialized differently by gender, social class, and race. As in Chris Landon's case, this creates different or unequal opportunities. An interactionist studying socialization is concerned with face-to-face exchanges and symbolic communication. For example, dressing baby boys in blue and baby girls in pink is one small way we convey messages about differences in gender roles. So as you guys can see, clearly there's different ways of looking at nature versus nurture, and looking at some of these specific examples mentioned above help us, I think, understand this in a deeper, more meaningful way. So consider these questions that are here in the Google Doc, and then you should be good to move on to the next part. Additionally, if you don't mind, think about this last question. Like thousands of other kids in the country and around the world, Mr. Potiker was adopted at a young age. Identify and explain at least 8 things or characteristics total that might have developed over time as a result of either nature or nurture. Place the characteristic in the correct corresponding chart down below. So for example, something you could easily say here is nature characteristics, some of the things that might be embedded in biology or my own evolution, if you will, through my genetics, or nurture in terms of behavior characteristics that you might think have developed for me over time, being, of course, raised in the United States and having been adopted from Santiago, Chile. I think that kind of sets the stage for you guys maybe to delve a little bit deeper. And if you need for clarity to understand nature versus nurture, the Legacy of an Adopted Child poem is something that's really important to me. And it basically kind of gives context as to how people view nature versus nurture and really how people might view these types of factors when, of course, raising a child with love. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this might have helped you out to a certain extent or degree. Good luck on the rest of the assignment, and once again, when you're finished with this and the CAMI part for part 3, you may submit on Google Classroom accordingly. Good luck.